Whether you notice it or not, humans are attracted to eyes. Well, most of us at least. Eyes are vital for nonverbal communication after all. That's why pareidolia often occurs if there is an eye-like object on a thing. Not only that though, people tend to care for animals that have eyes similar to our own, the spherical lens eye, also known as camera eye. That's also one of the reasons why people think cephalopods are interesting and likable, because if you did not realize, they do have camera eye. On the contrary, if you look at, let's say, jellyfish, they seem a lot more mysterious, distant. Have you ever heard of the question, would you still love me if I was a worm? Maybe it would be better if worms have camera eye. But what if? What if I told you? There are actually worms with camera eye. Should be obvious, but yeah, that is the topic of this video. So, let me bring up the question. What exactly is Alciopini? Alciopini are segmented worm. For simplicity, you could say they are polychaeta, which is usually considered a valid class. But lately, some vermiologists do not consider it as a valid taxon because it is polyphyletic. Talking about annelid systematic can be quite confusing because the morphological analysis does not exactly align with the molecular analysis. But luckily, Alciopini don't belong to the obscure groups of worms. They would be located around here in this phylogenetic tree. They are motile marine worms with parapodia on each segment, so Erantia is the subclass. The order would be Phylodochida. Phylodochida is often called paddle worm because their parapodia, these appendages, are paddle-like. Alright now, for you who are quite familiar with zoological nomenclature, you most likely would have guessed that Alciopini is a tribe name. And if you thought so, then you would be correct. Alciopini is an entire tribe of worms. Well, that being said, older publications tend to place them as family, in which they would be Familia Alciopidae, hence known as Alciopids in some articles that you might have stumbled on the internet. We are talking about the same thing here. Nevertheless, if Alciopini is to be considered as tribe, then the family would be Philodochidae, or Philodocids. I don't think Alciopini have a common name, so I usually just call them the camera-eyed worm, because why not? Other worms don't have camera eye after all. Well, as far as we know at least. Anyway, there are multiple genera in this tribe, each genus with multiple species. They can be found all over the world, even towards the Antarctic. They are still being discovered even to this year, so yeah, there might be a lot more of these worms that we haven't discovered. We'll see. Next, let's talk about their morphology, with emphasis on their eye. Alciopini are relatively small. The parasitic Ctenophoricula can be as short as 2 mm, while some of the bigger free-living pelagic Alciopini can almost reach 10 cm, which is still not that long of course. They have parapodia on each segment. Their parapodia have acicula, which provide internal support to their parapodia. Oh, by the way, the image that I'm currently showing is not that of Alciopini. I'm using this image just to show you what acicula is. The shape and size of their parapodia vary between species and genera. Some have elongated parapodia in some segments, while some don't. Some have distinct anterior and posterior part of their body, while some don't. Oh, and, of course, the amount of their segment also varies. They don't have specialized mouth part. Well, not to the extent that Eunicida such as bobbit worm have, that is. However, they do have eversible pharynx which they use to catch prey. By the way, while you are looking at the images that I've been showing up till now, a specific trait might catch your attention. A trait that is consistently present in all of the images. No, not the eye of course, that is too obvious. I'm talking about these spots along their body, present on most segments on each side. So these are their gonads. I've seen some articles stating the spots are glands, which might be true for some specific species, but most of the time, when you see spots like this on each side of Polychaeta, it's most likely gonads. Alright now, let's look at them in the eye. Their eyes are the easiest way to tell them apart from other groups of Polychaeta. Here, let me show you some other Polychaeta just to show how distinctly unique Alciopini are. Many Polychaeta do have eyes, but when they do, it's usually just relatively small eye spots. In comparison, Alciopini have large bulbous eyes with striking coloration. What's special is not only the size and color though. These eyes have spherical lens and complex retina, similar to the one in specific copepod, cephalopods, and vertebrates. Mostly at least. This kind of eyes is called camera eye because they work like a camera. And by that I mean, they work by focusing light with the lens into the retina. The anatomical detail and mechanics still differ between groups, especially for land creatures because they can use the cornea to refract the light. This could work because the vitreous fluid in the eye has higher refractive index than the air. Meanwhile, aquatic animals cannot because they are inside water, and the refractive index of the eye fluid barely have any difference to the surrounding water. But still, this eye gives Alciopini a high-resolution object vision, enabling them to discern objects from the background, including small and distant objects. Looking at their eyes in more detail, the ventral retina have higher receptor densities, which suggests they are adapted to detect objects silhouetted against the downwelling light. So basically, in this context, the objects above them, most of the time at least. Oh, and they are also found to have ultraviolet sensitivity. Now, the question is, why? Why are they the only worms to have this kind of eye? In fact, camera eyes are so rare that only few creatures have them. So, why? What warrants them to develop such eyes? Well, before addressing that question, let's talk about their lifestyle. But before that, oh hey, Alciopini can't really do this because they don't have eyelids. Unfortunate. Okay, now go back to resting your eyes. I believe all observed Alciopini are encountered in less than 300 meters depth, or perhaps slightly below that, which still count as shallow water. So yes, it's not that unlikely for you to stumble upon a random Alciopini if you like diving. And you could touch them if you want to, because they are not harmful to humans. Well, not that we know of at least. Actually, why did I even say that? Just don't touch any animals if you don't need to. Most Alciopini are free-living pelagic worms, which means they swim in the water column. By the way, if you want to see them moving around, I would suggest checking these videos out. Maybe give it a like too. Anyway, I did say most Alciopini are free-living, but a specific genus called Ctenophoricula, which I showed earlier, are ectoparasites that stick on comb jellies. Although we aren't exactly sure whether they live like that throughout their entire life, or it could just be a phase of their life. Still, we observed several individuals with various sizes, and the small ones could be their larvae. But we don't really know much about their reproduction and life cycle. Oh, by the way, I'm not just talking about Ctenophoricula. We don't really know much about any of them. Looking at most other polychaeta, especially phylodocids, we think they reproduce sexually by external fertilization. They most likely release their gametes to the water, then male and female gametes will meet stochastically, fertilization will occur, and then fertilized eggs will hatch into larvae. Oh, and also, this kind of behavior where they are supposedly guarding eggs were also observed several times. Although I don't think we are sure whether this is indeed them guarding their eggs, or this is them trying to feed on eggs. I don't think we've ever observed any of them hatching from eggs, nor any of them releasing eggs. The presence of small individuals with what seems to be a regenerating anterior might indicate Ctenophoricula can reproduce asexually, but it can just be a regenerative healing. We're not sure about a lot of things. That includes their diet. We think they are carnivorous because their relatives are carnivorous. They might feed on small planktonic animals. They might also feed on comb jellies and salps. That might be the reason why their eyes are sensitive to ultraviolet, because comb jellies and salps absorb ultraviolet light, hence easier for them to detect. The high density of ventral retina might indicate they mostly feed on drifters above them. But yeah, if it's not obvious enough, let me just state it. Again, we don't know much about them. Hence, we couldn't really figure out why they developed such an advanced eye. Not yet, at least. With more observation and discovery, perhaps someday we'll have the answer. There are definitely much to learn about them after all. Unfortunately, they aren't that often talked about. Hence, not a lot of people know about them, which is why I am making this video. For now, let's just learn what is known. And that's all for now. Oh, by the way, even though the references that I use for this video are all recent publications, we already know about them and their unique eyes since 2 centuries ago. They are just not popular, I guess. Anyway, enjoy your day.